Hello, friend. Welcome back to the Mindset Check podcast. This is your host, Misha McKittrick. This is a podcast where we believe when you take time for a mindset check, you have more power than you think you do. And where we also believe that when you pay attention to your internal state, to feelings that come up that you can gently walk through, and also the idea behind intentionally creating feelings like awe in your life, that those things change your life. They give you more power. All right, before we get started, I have to tell you something that I'm really feeling excited about. And I also am doing something just a little bit crazy, a tiny bit crazy, and I love it. I love it. So it came to me that I needed to make an offer. I needed to make an offer to coach 3 people, just 3. 3 people, and these 3 people will get access to my Heart Sync course, and then they will have individual coaching for 6 sessions in addition to the Heart Sync course. So while you're digesting and going through all of the beautiful information in the Heart Sync course and learning how to create heart coherence in your body and the way that that will change your living, that will change your life. Literally, I promise you, I just came off completing this course and teaching it to my clients. And now that course is going to be an evergreen course, which means you can purchase it at any time that's convenient for you and go through it at your own pace. But my clients had incredible wins. It was such a rewarding process. And I'm so proud of them. And I can't wait to have them reflect in the future, 6 months, a year, and look back at their life and see how much their life has been affected by this course. But in addition to receiving that course, I'm accepting 3 people to coach in conjunction with going through the Heart Sync course. So we can work on things that are very personal to you, and you can have incredible breakthroughs with the work that we do together. I'm so excited. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. Just let me know that you have questions. Remember that reaching out doesn't mean committing. Reaching out means that you want to know more. You want to see if it fits for you, from everything from time to, emotional capacity to financial to all of those things. And so I totally get that. Reach out, ask me all of your questions, and we can see if it's something that aligns. You can find me on Instagram at myfriendmisha and just DM me there. Yay, I'm so excited. All right, you guys, this season is winding down. We are in the last couple of episodes that we are doing with this story. So jump in completely. I hope you enjoy it because you get to see a whole other side of what happened for me, my side of finding answers that I needed. Let's dive in.
Monday, March 15th, 1999. Oh, Misha, you and your many facial expressions and reactions in recent weeks, asking you to marry me and your stuttering response and hesitant yes, your squill, tight squeeze, and kiss when I gave you the ring the next day in front of everybody, the visible panic setting in when we arrived back to Phoenix days later, the brightness in your eyes when I could see you finally had your answer. With great admiration and a little patience required, I love them all. Well, journal, let's start from the top. Misha thought she'd be clever by driving home a day early on Thursday the 4th for Lindy's wedding weekend and surprising all of us. Little did she know, her dad is my new partner in crime, so Elvin knew he'd need to secretly tell me so I could beat her at her own game. Note to self, if you're planning to propose to someone and your mom and Misha go to the same popular hairdresser where all the best news seems to spread, be sure to tell your mom not to say anything there. My goodness, the topic of me proposing spread like wildfire. People seemed to come out of the woodwork, asking how I was going to propose that weekend. I knew that if Misha went to April's basketball event before I could propose, that someone would likely spill the beans and probably say something they shouldn't and give it away prematurely. So Thursday late afternoon it was, a scavenger hunt all throughout her house, me hiding behind the kitchen curtain in my best suit until the right moment, listening to Misha rummage through the house until the final clue to push the play button on the stereo, my heart literally and disturbingly beating harder and faster than it ever has. It was hilarious. She didn't even realize what was happening when I came out. She thought it was just something cute I put together to welcome her home. It almost got ruined when she stepped away to call her dad. So glad he said the right thing without realizing I hadn't officially popped the question yet. Somehow I resurrected the moment when she came back to the couch and I slipped down on one knee. I was initially so bummed the ring couldn't get to Cedar from Salt Lake until the next day, so I had to improvise with those silly options I presented to her. It was even more hilarious observing Misha's reaction and whatever she was stumbling through with her "yes, but maybe in a few years" comments. Side note, as I look back over my previous journal entry about getting my answer, those words don't do justice to the absolute joy I was able to feel towards her and the complete dissipation of confusion, fear, and stress. I not only had my answer, but my heart was somehow allowed to feel more for her than at any other time. And I could see the wisdom and the timing of everything so clearly that I knew it would just be a matter of Misha seeing it the same way. I knew with my whole soul that everything would work out however it needed to. I realized nothing could shake my confidence in us and what was meant to be, after all. Friday night became such a highlight. How fitting for so many aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents to arrive at my parents' home for Lindy's wedding and share that moment. My Aunt Shannon brought the ring down from Salt Lake. We had to strategically arrange the handoff so Misha would be oblivious. The plan was devised. Shannon would playfully ask about the toy rings, and I would be ready to propose again, this time with the real one. What a cherished memory. I hope I didn't take away too much from Lindy's special weekend, but it had to go down that way. Everyone there has loved Misha and our story to that point. Looking back, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. I could only outwardly smile and inwardly laugh when we drove back to Phoenix, and to see Misha enter this sort of freak out state, I had no doubt she'd soon feel better about her yes. Sure enough, I'll never be able to grasp what caused her contrasting change days later, but what seemed to be one moment to the next, she was looking at me with bright, smiling eyes I had never seen. I didn't even need her to tell me. I knew that she knew. Sunday, June 20th, 1999. We just got back from our honeymoon to the Bahamas. I love that it felt so much like being in the West Indies again. We even had a funny moment at the street market. Misha couldn't begin to understand this lady Alma. I became the interpreter of island English throughout the trip. This past week has been a dreamland, not just because things couldn't have gone any better with the ceremony, reception, and all the fun things we did. It was the little things, laying next to Misha after the madness of the post-ceremony pictures, just relaxing at the park, staring at each other as husband and wife, and eating Taco Bell, holding her hand on the drive back to Cedar from St. George. Seeing Misha cause my dad to let loose on the dance floor. Only she could do something like that. So many family, friends, and mission buddies traveling from far to celebrate with us. What a celebration it was. Walking around the corner of the hotel room, on my hands, just trying to get Misha's attention and to get her to put the book down. All the constant laughter and playfulness. But mostly the constant being in awe that life is able to feel more amazing than I ever thought possible. I can only wonder what the next chapters of our marriage will include.
Remember that I told you that Jake would have needed a very solid answer? I literally put him through the ringer. It is a very nervous thing. You know, you see when people are about to ask someone to marry them and they are sweating bullets. Like it is one of life's uh you both know that you're shifting and you're shifting big, you know? And it's a nerve-wracking thing. And yes, Jake was crazy nervous. But let me tell you what actually, like, from my side of everything that happened. Yes, he is so on the money with needing to be a partner in crime with my dad because I was surprising Jake, right? I was wanting to come into town early and I thought I would have fun surprising Jake, but also surprising my little sister to show up for her basketball tournament. Well, like Jake said, everybody in town knew. And it wouldn't have been a good idea for me to go out in a town without already having been proposed to. So I first arrive at Jake's parents' house. We didn't have cell phones back then, right? And they did this whole thing where they got like my dad to call me to say like, oh, you need to head home actually because of XYZ. And they told me Jake was at the study group. Meanwhile, he's waiting at my house with this very extravagant, scavenger hunt. And every single message was talking about like our future and our, and like I did not put it together. My brain, the reality of us getting married truly had never really, really sunk in. Like maybe it did, but man, did my subconscious go nuts, totally crazy when it was the real deal. Just as we had danced, we had kind of started to settle in, my dad calls, and luckily these are the words he said. He's literally so adorable. He said, like, he kind of referenced the surprise. He was laughing. He thought it was fun. And then he said, well, Mish, some things are just more important. And I was like, yeah, Dad, for sure. So he has not proposed yet. And then he says, all right, well, I'll be home soon to take a shower and we can head to the banquet. And Jake knows, okay, so he's coming home and he just feels so much more pressure. Like I gotta do this right now. And he did get back into the moment, slipped down on his knee. And as soon as he did, he's not kidding when I was stuttering. And I was like, I mean, I totally need to pray about this. Like, I think it's a good idea, but maybe we should wait like 4 years. I was a mess immediately. Like my insides were screaming, get me out of here. And then, I didn't like portray that much of what was going on inside me. I just kind of stuttered and said those things. And I was like a total mess. And you want to know what totally calmed me in that moment? Was looking at Jake, and his answer to me was, whatever you need, Mish. And I knew that he knew. And I forever described that moment as that stalwart solidarity, that security that I needed. It was like a blanket of peace. Okay, but then Jake, we hugged and he left and I went to the banquet and I started freaking out even more. And to tell you the truth, like the option for rings that he presented to me, like, I don't know, it made me feel like even like more anxious about it. But I'll tell you why I think that was good in just a second. So I go to the banquet and people start saying, oh my gosh, you're engaged, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, get me out of here. And I was like, Mom, Dad, I gotta go. Like, this is too much. But I stayed for the banquet, cheered, was there supporting my sister, and, bugged out of there. And I was seriously considering leaving. I mean, I was in town because Jake's sister was getting married, right? So I needed to be there and show up. But I was seriously considering leaving to a bed and breakfast for like 3 or 4 days, just so that I could spend time alone and connect and look for my own answers. And I was just also just freaking out too, because so many people knew, and then they kept asking, and it made it more and more and more. Even at the grocery store, guys. Like, I went into the grocery store with my dad that night after the banquet, and people, no, this was the next day. And people were like, oh my gosh, I heard you got engaged, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh my, are you really for real? So the next day, I mean, I had some really great talks with both of my parents. And I got to a place where I was completely like at peace. I didn't feel like I had my answer from God, but I still felt peace. And so then it made it very fun the next night when Jake, proposed in front of his family with the real ring. And that was like, that's why I was telling you in a minute, I'll tell you, because I think that I was also able to have that moment on my own and privately with Jake and try to sort through my feelings and then be presented with this absolutely stunner of a ring and to be at peace with the idea. And it changed everything, right? So then we go through the weekend, we do the wedding and all the business. And the plan was that he was going to be coming back to Arizona with me for a few days, or maybe a week or something like that. And so we're driving home and everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. We start to pull into the Phoenix Valley. And I slip back into that panic. Driving into the valley and also walking into my apartment was like being at a place where I finally had my life together. I finally had things like going and I was in control of everything. And my subconscious was going, whoa, do you remember what marriage is? Like, this is not cool. Don't do this. Like, wah, 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 right? Like major alarm bells going off. And I freaked out again. And when I say freak out, I'm not saying that I was like yelling or freaking out, like visibly. Internally, I was freaking out. And Jake could feel that. And I probably like spoke about it. Like he probably might have asked me what was going on. And I, whatever. I know that I didn't talk a lot about it to him because I knew ultimately what I needed to do was to find my answer. But I also really felt like I was suffocating because I needed to be alone during those freakouts and he was there. And it was me searching. It was just crazy. And so he was so gracious and amazing. And I went on my own to not only to like class and to work and stuff, but I spent some time alone for the next, I don't know, maybe day or two or whatever. And a couple of things, 3 things stand out to my mind about things that I did. I went in to talk to my religious teacher at college. So he's called an institute teacher. And I was totally freaking out. And I didn't go in to talk to him about this. I think he was just totally guided. And he was like, hey, Mish, do you need to talk? And I was like, yes. So I went into his office and he's like, I don't know, we were just kind of talking about whatever. Like it wasn't really the thing until he said, what's going on with this ring on your finger? And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, blah, blah, blah. And I voiced every concern. Like, he's so young, we're so young. Because I also had so much, I'm not kidding you, indoctrination from college about not getting married until you're 28 years old. And, there was a lot of feminist views that were really, really presented so in such a way that that's the way the world is and that's the way the world should be. And anybody who's not that is dumb. That even when we did get married, I didn't tell my professors that I had gotten married. I didn't change my name at school for 2 years. There was a lot of pressure also from that, but the majority of the pressure came from me freaking out because of my subconscious, basically reverting to what I knew before. And then I was also really reverting to the thoughts of, Jake is so young, he hasn't experienced things, I'm so scared, blah, blah, blah. And my institute teacher looked at me when I told him that my main concerns, all these concerns, and he said, Misha, he said, would you rather have a guy that had character and no experience, or experience and no character? And I was like, it was like in that moment, I could see everything so clearly. And I was like, character. For sure, 100%. And I understood that he could get experience. Okay. So there's that. And I left there finding a little bit of peace. And then I spent time in a place that felt very spiritual to me, which was the temple grounds. And I was praying my guts out. I even went into this little room and just privately spent time and I thought that lightning would happen, that I would experience something in that prayer. And that's not what happened. And so what I remember praying for is, because I had to leave, it was like time to go. My best friend Megan and her fiance, we were going to help them paint a room at their condo. And I was going to go pick up Jake. Anyway, it was time to go. And I just left with asking to please guide my feelings. It's interesting that I knew enough to trust myself to be able to trust those feelings as sensory evidence that come. And so I just asked that would be the case. And I remember that night, I got this overwhelming sense of peace. Not only peace. Watch, I wrote in my journal about it. Listen to this. It says, "My night with Jake was awesome. Throughout that week, I let go of all the little things that were preventing me to be in this new image. Like, I'm only 20, Jake hasn't had enough time home from his mission, etc. That night, as I was able to be with Jake, my insides burned. I felt something. It was like I knew I had loved him before, but I didn't know I could feel like this. I told Jake that I'm so happy, and I'm so happy to marry you. He probably thinks I'm a freak out. One extreme or the other. I'm so positive that I want to be with Jake the rest of my life. And I'm so happy he's the best. He loves me so much, and I feel that." So this excerpt was written also after I had one more experience that was also on my mind. So I remember feeling amazing that night. And then the next day, we were at something that's called a fireside, and it's just a gathering where spiritual messages are shared. And it's so cool when you put yourself in the right environment, how you can be receiving a message that might not even be, what's being shared with the entire audience. Like, inside of you, you're receiving and downloading messages. And it was such an incredible experience. And I left that meeting knowing without any doubt that this was the right choice, with all of the messages and the instruction that I had downloaded. And I wish I had written more detail to differentiate the feelings that happened that night and the messages that I gained in that. But ultimately, I was left with so much assurity, so much incredible assurity. And there's a couple things that I really want to point out inside of all of this. The first thing is how absolutely beautiful it is that Jake was so stable in the face of my insecurity and my, his ability to just be in such assurance was a very peaceful place for me to be able to land. And when we get answers that give us a surety like that, when we have our own conclusions over things that we've been pondering, especially when we've had to work really hard at them, it can be such a gift to us, such an incredible gift. And so I'm telling you that on the heels of our last episode, just to reassure you that if you are in the middle of looking for your own answer about anything in life, that you know that when it is harder to come by, the more stable you are about that conclusion, that answer that you do receive when you receive it. It's, the bigger the resistance, the bigger the breakthrough, the bigger the need for and the more desire, and the more, it's just so much more that you can be in a place of stability and security. So that's the first thing I wanted to point to you about that. And then secondly, just to talk about to really break down knowingly what we do when we have freakouts, when we have these really pieces of trauma coming up in our life. It's like that overwhelming fear that you've been trying to suppress, a person, place, or thing that brings up a feeling of shame or fear, or really anything that your deep brain deems as a threat, right? And that's trauma. That's a trigger. That's the freak out. That's all of that. And man, we spend so much energy pushing that away and running away from it, instead of coming into it, feeling it, remembering that when you are hijacked by an intense emotion, that it's really your system's way of trying to get your attention, to protect you, and not necessarily telling you the absolute truth of the situation. It's your deep brain's way of trying to alert you that something in your current environment, quote, looks similar to something that has hurt or threatened you before. So I really love the idea that when we are having a freak out over something, that it's not necessarily about something that's true of the situation. And I think really kind of taking that apart in this moment will help you in the future if you have a freak out, right? That we can really only see the world as we have been conditioned to see it. So there's a story called Walking on Water that I want to share with you about that. It says, once there was a boy who lived with his family on a farm. They had a beautiful dog who would go down to the pond for hours every day in the spring and summer with the boy to practice retrieving various items. The boy wanted to prepare his dog for any scenario that may come up during duck season because he wanted his dog to be the best hunting dog in the whole country. The boy and his dog had vigorous training sessions every day until the dog was so obedient he wouldn't do anything unless he was told to do so by the boy. As duck season rolled in with the fall and winter months, the boy and his dog were eager to be at all their regular spots down at the pond near their house. Only a few minutes passed away before the two heard the first group of ducks flying overhead. The boy slowly raised his gun and shot 3 times before killing a duck, which landed in the center of the pond. When the boy signaled his dog to retrieve the dog charged through the bushes toward the pond. However, instead of swimming in the water like he had practiced so many times, the dog walked on the water's surface, retrieved the duck, and returned it to the boy. The boy was astonished. His dog had an amazing ability to walk on water. It was like magic. The boy knew no one would ever believe this amazing thing that he had just witnessed. He had to get someone else down there to see this incredible phenomenon. The boy went to a nearby farmer's house and asked if he would hunt with him the next morning. The neighbor agreed and met up with the boy the following morning at his regular spot by the pond. The pair patiently waited for a group of ducks to fly overhead, and soon enough, they heard them coming. The boy told the neighbor to go ahead and take a shot, which the neighbor did, killing one duck. Just as the day before, the boy signaled to his dog to fetch the duck. Miraculously, the dog walked on water again to retrieve the duck. The boy was bursting with pride and could hardly contain himself when he asked his neighbor, "Did you see that? What did you think?" The neighbor responded, "I wasn't going to say anything, but your dog doesn't even know how to swim." The boy sat in disbelief as his neighbor pointed out a potential flaw of the dog, rather than recognizing the fact that what he had just done was a miracle. It's really important to remember that we don't always see the absolute truth of the situation. We see things as we have been conditioned to see them. And that's the only way that we are even able to see the world. Even if we get really clear on trying to be completely objective, we can never really erase all of the conditioning that we have in our life, all the experiences and all of these things that combine to create us as a human and the way that we will see the world. I love, the optical illusions that, people see one picture and then somebody else looks at it and they see something else in the same picture. Or I've also seen the optical illusion where one person sees, 4 logs and the other one sees 3. Or the blind men with the elephant, and one of them is touching, the tail and one's touching the trunk, and they're all describing something different, right? And insisting that they are right and that they have proof that that's the way that it is. And that's also the way that our brain works when we're experiencing this trigger. We have proof that something in the past was a certain way. And that's why I think one of the most powerful things that we could ask ourselves when we're experiencing these types of freakouts is it possible that there could be another way of seeing this? Is it possible? And can we start to have the idea with our lives that dancing around our triggers is only going to create more energy on our end and make life actually harder? That we can then start to dip into the purpose of what our body is trying to teach us and show us. That we can then begin to walk compassionately through what these feelings are trying to teach us. Also, as we're being taught the things our feelings have to teach us, remembering that if it's actually something that you don't want to see, that you can do something about it. This is really, really what growth is, right here. It's being able to go into our own insides and to work with what we find there. Last week I went to see A Christmas Carol, the play, and it was such an incredible rendition of this story. I loved it seriously so much. And it's like this moment where the story re-sinks in for you, where he is really starting to get a different perspective of his life because he's able to now have sort of this outsider view from when he was a child, from when he was, dating that really great gal that he ends up, chasing away and not marrying. And the way that he becomes so grumpy and greedy and all of these things. And the way that his life will turn out if he stays on that path. He gets this glimpse. And he gets the understanding that he could also change. There was a line in the play that said, his life lay before him and it could be changed. And that was the most redeeming side of this terrible story of who he actually was. And I embrace that with my whole heart because I think as humans, we are consistently needing to change, to recall ourselves, to recognize that a way that we are being isn't really good for us, isn't serving us. Maybe even pushing down what is trying to, be there, that's not what's working for us. And moving through it properly, that is growth. Ooh, and there's so many incredible ways to move through it. And we've done a lot of podcasts about that, and using your body to help you, using breath work and meditation and, oh my word, heart coherence. And there's so many really beautiful tools, right, that we can use, that it's not like we're just spending time in our brain trying to make sense of it. We're allowing our body to assist us. We're allowing the divine to assist us, right? We're truly, properly trying to gain different perspective. It's an incredible thing. And I love that even back then that I trusted enough to know that I needed to spend time alone and that I needed to move through it and process it on my own, and to be able to get my own answer, instead of just relying on what somebody else thought or felt. That's really, really important, because later in life, right, looking back, there have definitely been times where I have then relied also on my answer within our marriage. And man, that's a really incredible thing. And there's so much more in the story that's so good. Like, one of my biggest concerns, of course, was all about Taylor and how she fit into this beautiful story. And I wrote in my journal about a time that, Jake and I had really great conversations about Taylor, and I did feel like with my whole heart that he loved her and that he accepted her. But I wrote in my journal about this experience that we had with his family, because it was also important to me that they accepted her. And, later in life, I know a lot more that's not a really huge necessary thing. It's not as big as what I thought it was then. But the feeling of acceptance and love and even excitement that I received from them, honestly, was a huge and incredible blessing to me. So I wrote how we had gathered his whole family and we had a discussion about Taylor and about, what our beliefs are, really, because we, in our religious beliefs, it's so incredible that we believe that we will be with her again, and that we have the opportunity to be sealed to her. And it is like the most reassuring part of the idea that she's not here, is the idea that I will be able to be with her again, and that I'll even have the chance to raise her again. Okay, that's a mind-blowing thought, that I would be able to have her on my hip again. And that's truly what I really believe after all of this seeking that I've done to get my own answers, and the experiences that I've had, since. This is the coolest experience. And I think I shared a little bit about it when I was sharing about the grief of losing Taylor, but the opportunity to have been sealed to her later, after Jake and I were married, we were both sealed to her. And that just means that you are connected for eternity, forever. And that's like an entirely different podcast. But it's just a beautiful thing. And so we were having this discussion about all of these beliefs. And this is what I wrote in my journal. We showed Taylor's video and gave framed pictures of Taylor to his family. They all cried and welcomed Taylor, just as they would have one of their own children. It was comforting to hear Lynette's words. That's Jake's mom. Misha, I know Jake, and I'm sure you know this, but to make sure you do. I know He does, can, and will. Love Taylor like his own child. To hear his younger brother Jordan say, "So this is my niece?" were some words I will never forget. We were blessed with such an overwhelming good experience. Wow. Something that still weighs that heavy on my heart. And to have people who love and accept that I was brought into. It was a very, also, reassuring and comforting experience. So Jake describes our wedding a little bit, and there was a friend that she was a close enough friend to travel for the wedding, but she wasn't one of my closest friends. But after the wedding, she described this whole event as the most romantic event she had ever attended, right? Because there's all of these elements of triumph in our story already as we were just getting married. And it was, like Jake had mentioned, such a state of awe. This is what I wrote in my journal when I went on my bachelorette party with my friends. Lately, I find myself sitting in complete awe. Like 2 weeks ago, I was in Mexico with Meg and Penny. We went for my bachelorette party. We were sitting in a restaurant outside overlooking the ocean, drinking pina coladas, and I was hitting the self-actualization button. Well, in a sense, I was realizing how lucky I was to be there in such a beautiful place with my best girlfriends. Also, that in a week, I would be having the shower of my life because I knew what they were planning. They're amazing. Then getting married to the man of my dreams, going to the Bahamas for a week, house sitting in Cedar and moving to Phoenix and buying our first house together. When I realize these things, I also realize that I must pick up my jaw. Like sitting in awe and wonder is, it's one thing when we're really in a state of awe and wonder, when the things around us are happening. There's times when we're in awe and wonder and we don't even know it because we're not taking the pause to appreciate it. There's also the whole idea of awe coming to you because you spend time in awe. All right, listen to this quote by Wayne Dyer. He says, "Give yourself a gift of 5 minutes of contemplation in awe of everything you see around you. Go outside, turn your attention to the many miracles around you. This 5-minute-a-day regimen of appreciation and gratitude will help you focus your life in awe." It's beautiful, right? I like this one too. It said, "I've always tried to live by the awe principle. That is, can I find awe, wonder, and enchantment in the most mundane things conceivable?" That's Crave Hatkoff. You can find awe in anything. And when you do, it is universal law that more wonder and awe will find you. Like, period, end of story. Universal law, meaning it is the way things work. It has been proven that when you are able to emit a feeling or a vibration, that you then attract that feeling and vibration back to you. And I look at Jake and I's situation and go, wow, everyone has a choice. There are many people who live fairy tale lives and don't take the time and actually have negative thoughts and feelings while they're living these incredible lives. I love learning about how, poor people are the most humble and they're actually super happy. It further proves that our state all comes from our internal experience. What we believe, what we desire to appreciate, what we deem is worthy of awe. And personally, I love this principle so much of spending time in something that you want to bring forward more in your life. Because after learning it, it makes so much sense. And I wish I knew it, much younger. Because simply by way of knowing it, chases away thoughts that are negative. Or, the times when you feel like you're on a teeter-totter where you could choose to believe one thought over another. You could choose to assign and ascribe all the negativity and be thinking that. The other day I vividly can see the way that the kitchen sink was such a mess and I was cleaning it. And I was like, I was literally saying some things in my mind that were like, hey, y'all live here? Like no one's in the kitchen. And I'm having this dialogue with myself because I'm like, do you live here? Do you live here? Do you live here? Did anybody make this mess? Right? And I'm having this certain dialogue with myself. Somewhat funny, but then I'm realizing in the moment when I'm starting to have it that I almost shifted to more negativity, like more complaining. Okay, and those are really tender and beautiful places to be. They're a realization of a choice. And how do we find more space to be able to make those choices? That happens with heart coherence. That happens with meditation. That's, if you're having a hard time accessing it, that's where you go. You figure that out. So ultimately, for, tying everything together in this episode, it always comes back to internal state, right? Whether those freakouts or what we're spending time in to be able to attract to ourselves, that all has to do with our internal state. And hoping that you truly grasp a little more about the power that you have when you choose to compassionately and gently walk through those triggers and freakouts and allow them to teach you. And when you pay attention closely to the state that you're keeping and how vital that is for the entire future and the life that you create. And I hope that in that you see that you have more power than you think you do. I hope you loved today's episode. Please share it with someone. And also, if you have any questions or comments, anything you would like to communicate with me about, just reach out. You can reach me by writing an email to hello@myfriendmisha.com. And you can also reach out to me by DMing me on Instagram, and that's @myfriendmisha. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and for inviting me into your journey. And as we part, I want to invite you to really set an intention to be in awe. Like, if you could just pause and look at the things that are right in front of you right now and just sit in awe over whatever it is that you see, and carry that intention with you through the next season, and it will change it. All right, friend, until next time.